Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. Today's topic is Noah's obedience. Co-hosting with me today is Shalom Talamarjum. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. What about you?
I'm doing good too. Well, today we're talking about Noah, and Noah was a righteous man filled with God's Spirit. He was instructed by God to build an ark because he would flood the earth because of the evil in it, and save Noah's family because he was righteous. So, based on Noah's story, we know that he is a righteous person because if he really wasn't righteous, he probably would have ended up in the flood just along with everybody else in the world. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. And I think another part about the whole story of Noah is that a lot of people made fun of him and thought and mocked him for what he was doing because I don't know if you've seen it, but there was this guy in Ghana and he was saying that there was going to be a flood and people were making fun of him for that. And that's probably how Noah felt, but people were probably making fun of the guy from Ghana because we already know that can't happen again. But that's probably how Noah felt. And when these people were doing it, they didn't realize that the consequences were actually going to be on them and they were going to die in the flood. Meanwhile, Noah and his family lived. What do you think about that?
I agree with you because they kept mocking him, and that's one lesson where we shouldn't mock others because you shouldn't mock others because you don't know what is gonna happen after you mock them. Because if they were to listen to him and actually not mock him, that person might have actually have a chance to not be caught in that flood. But since everybody mocked him, their punishment was them being flooded and then drowning to death. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. And another thing about Noah's story is that he had faith in God. If God had never flooded the earth at that time and he told one of us to do it, maybe like a lukewarm Christian to do it, that Christian probably wouldn't do it. They would be like, "Oh, it's not like there's actually going to be a flood that's going to kill every single human being on this planet. Why would God do such a thing like that?" But if you were Noah, well, unlike Noah, he had faith and he just trusted God with his whole life, his family's life, the animals' lives, everybody's lives. He trusted him completely. But nowadays, we've lost our trust with other people, including God for some reason, which is why people doubt him, which is something we shouldn't do either. What do you think about that?
I agree with you because one reason it might not have been easy for him to obey, like you said, is because he know no one doesn't think wouldn't think that God would just kill everyone on earth. That is basically just forsaking his people, and then everybody else also thought the same because they probably would have said, "Why would God forsake the people He created?" So I think that's probably one of the reasons they were mocking him. And then another thing I would like to say is how God will not forsake us for somebody else because God like if Noah died because of everybody else's sins, he probably would have been that wouldn't make any sense because why would you die for someone's sins even though you didn't do anything? Like I know Jesus came down to die for your sins and God sent him there to do that. But why would you get drowned in a flood because of what people do? Do you what do you think about that?
I agree with you. And I think another reason why it may have been hard for Noah to obey, which it was, is because a lot of people, like you said earlier, because a lot of people were not on his side. a lot of people were doubting him and what God was going to do. They're like, oh, God's not even going to do this. You're just doing all of this work and stress on yourself for no reason. And when you realize you're just going to make fun of yourself and you're going to look stupid. But it ended up not being that. And it was someone else that died, which was them. And another thing is that obedience is important because if someone, for example, maybe like Jamal was like Noah, but when people started doubting what he was going to do, he started to doubt them too. If Noah had done that, probably everybody would have gotten wiped off of the planet and God would have to restart. That would have been something really bad, and God would feel very guilty, most likely, because he killed everybody on the planet, even though he didn't want to. But if Jamal were simply to like obey, that wouldn't have happened in the first place, which is why consequences are also important to remember and to know when they're good or bad. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. And another thing I would like to say is why obedience is important. And one major reason I'd say that is just like you said, if if Noah had backed down and then thought that he was just making fun of himself, looking dumb, and and he stopped, he would be wiped away on earth. Just like if we don't obey, because if we don't obey, there's consequences. Just like you said, you may not know the consequences now, but we already know the consequences later, which is when you die. So another major lesson from Noah is that we should know that obedience is important, and we should also remember the consequence of each thing. So, what do you think about that?
I agree with you, and I think that consequences are very important when it comes to doing sins because when we like commit immorality, we know that it depends if you're like, for example, maybe you're greedy or you're cruel to other people and you enjoy doing it, you're going to think that there's no consequences because your conscience has just wandered off into thinking that everything is going to be good for you in life, especially if you're greedy. But if you were to be a regular, strongly believing Christian, you would know that doing one thing is bad and the other is good. If you were to like kill someone, you would know that's bad. But some people would not think that's bad. They would think it's like part of something or like a culture or a religion when in reality that isn't true. What do you think about that?
I agree with you because some people may have a different understanding of different things. But we need to also make it clear that we shouldn't just join them because you know that what you want to do is basically their culture and you just want to do it with them because you just want to do it for no reason, and you're just doing it because you know it's a sin, and that you just want to make it seem like it's not anymore. And another thing I like to talk about is that you don't need like full understanding to obey other people. Well, obey the right people. Because if you just obey people in general, you might just be doing things that you're not supposed to. So, one a re- obedience doesn't need full understanding because you don't need to know everything just to obey. Like your parents can just say, "Come do the laundry." You don't even need full understanding to obey that. But then if you just try lying, you're just trying to use your understanding to make a lie and then make up you doing something right now. What do you think about that?
I agree with you, and I feel very strong about the part of how you said we don't need full understanding on something when God is the one who told us, and we don't need to question or doubt what he told us to do. We just follow it because we already know everything God has planned for us is going to be like true. And it's going to always have a good benefit to us because God would never do something that was to like ruin our lives because he's a merciful God and he loves us very much. Another thing about Noah was that when he listened to God, he ended up saving his himself and his family and tons of animals because if he had decided to disobey or go off of it, he would have killed them all and he would have literally like he basically been the ones to be responsible for it. And another part about that is that earlier when I said about the guy from Ghana that said there was going to be another flood, God had said that he after the flood there was a rainbow which showed his covenant that there was not going to be any other floods that would flood the whole of the earth, which shows that whatever the man from Ghana was saying was completely incorrect because we only believe what God says, and his covenants always stay covenants. Regular human beings cannot make covenants. They can only make promises, and some people break the promises that they keep, which is why we shouldn't deceive others because deception is another part of immorality, aka sin. What do you think about that?
I agree with you because when you're talking about deception, you how you saying humans can't keep covenants, but they can keep promises. And I think one reason why most people break their promise is because of deception, as you said, because they want something, they're just gonna trick other people by making a fake promise, and then after making that fake promise, they break it, and then they just break the promise, and then they end up with what they want, while the other person is either mad, sad, or wants to just get revenge. Yeah. What do you think about that?
I agree with you, and a problem is that a lot of people are deceiving others, which has caused, like I said earlier, this is why a lot of people do not trust each other because people have been like very deceptive nowadays. And even in the Ten Commandments, it tells you to not cheat your neighbor, which means to not deceive them, not lie to them, not even to take advantage of them. And also, another thing is that we should always remember God's faithfulness because if we're like, I don't know how to explain it, but if we didn't have faith and He didn't have mercy, there's a lot of things that will go wrong. And that's why we should be very grateful for everything that He does for us, which is called gratitude. And another thing is that we should encourage obedience because when we obey, it gains trust instead of doing the opposite, which is lying and breaking trust, which is something we should stay away from as children of God. And we should continue to learn from God and Jesus so that we can go to the gates of heaven. What do you think about that?
I agree with you because we shouldn't be deceptive with others. Like even sometimes I may be able to feel like I don't trust some of my friends. Sometimes it's just because of something they've been doing before. But that's all I have today. And do you have anything else to say before we round up?
Yes, one of the core lessons we can learn from Noah's story, I'll only name one, and you can name a few other ones if you would like. A really important lesson is that we should never doubt God and we should always have faith and trust in Him. Without faith or trust, there's nothing because when you don't like have faith in God, it just means you don't care about what He's even doing. You're just there. And you're like, I don't really, yeah. So that's one of the main lessons that we should learn from Noah's story, because if he were to like just think, oh, he's not going to do this thing, or he would doubt what God's power can really do, we might have not even, we might not be here today. Are there any other lessons you'd like to add?
Before we close, there are three main lessons that I'd like to say before I round it up. Is that we shouldn't walk up is because we don't know what will happen at the end. And another one is that God will not forsake us. As you said, that He showed Noah the rainbow, and also that obedience is important, and there's nothing more important than that. If you just don't believe it, we should always believe that obedience is important, because lying can just bring us consequences that we may not like. So that's what we have all for today. Thank you for joining us today, whoever's watching us. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, and bye.